Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are joining us today for the PegNet Weekly Update. Today is Wednesday, May 6th. I'm Kaitie Zhee, joined with David Johnston.
Hey, everybody.
Hey. David, so we've got so much going on with PegNet right now. A lot of activity has been, under wraps and developing. Some news has come out this last week. Things such as the Android mobile wallet has been released, so that's out there. Also, a big shout out to Sergey in the community. He has taken leadership in DeFi integrations and has made PUSD one of the default options in the Mu, the MyEther wallet. So that's really cool. I've been a long time user of that. One of the core things that I think we want to get into this week and really unpack for those who are watching is all of the developments, the PegNet 2.0 that is coming and what that encompasses, because there's quite a bit that's been going on with the various different PIPs, the PegNet improvement proposals. So I'll pass things over to you, and maybe what we could do is kind of unpack what is PegNet 2.0, and then just a high level of the different PIPs that are getting rolled into this new 2.0 and the timeline that the community can kind of expect.
Yeah, absolutely. So, PegNet 2.0, I'm extremely excited about. This is sort of work that's been culminating for months as people have put forth different proposals. It kind of feels like I hear on repeat the same 3 or 4 questions on Telegram and Discord. It's like, when is peg conversions going to be unlimited? When does, staking drop? When do these different improvements that have been put out there come into fruition, right? So that's all part of PegNet 2.0. And the PIPs that are in discussion right now are mostly PIP 10 for unlocking peg conversions, PIP 12 for staking based on holding P assets, PIP 13 related to giving, for the first time, stakers the ability to report oracles like the miners do. PIP 14 is a security upgrade, sort of the ability for the system to detect divergences between the prices reported by the stakers and the prices reported by the oracles that are reported by the miners. And then finally, PIP 15, which is protection against API errors. So these are sort of the big 3 or 4 things that need to be delivered in order for us to move PegNet to the next level, right? Because everybody's seen it's been very successful when it comes to conversions. We just crossed, without much fanfare, no big deal, $2 billion over the PegNet rails, right? Like, people are using it a lot for trading. We've seen a huge number of signups for P-Trader. And so people are moving a lot of volume through the system into different pegged assets. And those volume numbers are all pegged assets to pegged assets. But we haven't seen a huge liquidity breakout on the external markets, right? And in order to achieve that, we need to see PEG really sort of get unlocked, right? And the reason that conversions have been reduced is to protect against attack vectors, right? So we saw that 51% attack not long ago. The reason the guy couldn't do anything with it is there was that protection against going into PEG, so he couldn't dump the tokens, so he just ended up burning them, right? And maybe it was a white hat, and he came up with a pretty interesting proposal for how to strengthen the oracles in PegNet. And that's actually become PIP 14. So we have our first anonymously proposed PIP, if you will, with the white hat, offering a way to close that attack vector going forward by not just looking at prices for miners, but also from stakers, right? So that's sort of the heart of that proposal. So all of this sort of, it's not easy to ship part of it by itself, right? You can't open peg conversions unless you close the attack vectors, right? So you've got to close the attack vectors first, which is, interwoven between PIP 12, 13, 14, and 15 in order to go back and open up the peg conversions in pip10. So everybody's like, well, just go ahead and open the peg conversions. No, we can't until you close the attack vectors, right? So that's been the thing that's been sort of everybody's eager to see the conversions go unlimited, but in order to do that safely, you have to close the attack vector. So it kind of feels like we finally got all the pieces together that we need in order to address the attack vectors, from miners, from bad API data, from these different sources. And finally, we can, put them all together as one big update. And here is PegNet 2.0. So a lot to unpack there, but let's go ahead.
What I think is valuable and the community should understand is that when you're building these kinds of systems, especially dealing with people's values, it's important to have that adequate testing being done to the system. And that takes time. There's really no shortcutting that. And so I feel good about how much time has been laid out with all of the community collaboration and participation to kind of expose and test the limitations of PegNet and the system. So where can we strengthen it? Because if we're going to be strengthening a system, you want to be doing it much earlier into the development and the growth of it than, have this huge kind of that Mt. Gox, that big collapse, or some type of catastrophic event that just sends waves. So I feel really good about the timing of all of this. I do want to unpack each of these one by one. Also, if you could touch on the timeline for when folks could expect this PegNet 2.0 to roll out, and how they can get involved to improve or influence some of these decisions before that becomes finalized for PegNet. So let's go one by one. David, pop quiz on what each of these different pips are and what they are discussing, and then, if you want to get into those.
Sure. So I'll make it easy. I have just shared an article which aggregates together all of the pips that we're talking about in my Defending PegNet Oracle Data article on Medium. So you should see that in the chat on Zoom. And if you want to go ahead and share that, we can go through that list. So Defending PegNet Oracle Data right there. So in the article, it basically sort of talks about what we just discussed, right? PIP 10, PIP 12, 13, 14, and 15. First addressing front running, which is what PIP 10 does. Let's start there. We've seen this in other systems. So in synthetics, for example, people will try to mess with the market and they'll try to do a synthetics trade on the back end and try to capture that front running, if you will, right? And to avoid that, PegNet does conversions in the next block. And that's pretty much sufficient to shortcut any front running for major coins. But there's a couple of tokens in the system, mostly PEG and FCT, that have lower market caps and are still vulnerable to front running because it doesn't take a lot of money to push around their market price. Now, up until now, PIP 7 basically reduced the conversions that could happen into PEG, 5,000 per block. And that was sufficient to address the attack vector, but it has the effect of lowering the liquidity of PEG. So how do you unlock the liquidity without reopening the attack vector? The answer is PIP 10. So PIP 10 averages conversions of PEG and FCT over many blocks. And there's an active debate about how many blocks, 10, 144, which would be a day. So instead of getting an instant price on PEG, you would get the median effectively for the past day, let's say, on PEG. So if an attacker comes in and is trying to move around the market price, it's really going to be expensive because they have to move the price for a very long time before it has any effect on the price that their conversions happen at, right? So that's effectively this averaging or sort of simulated spread, if you will, that is introduced by PIP 10, and the intention is to apply it to FCT and to PEG as the lowest value tokens in the system that are most vulnerable to this type of front running. So that's really the heart of PIP 10 is, I had another article released earlier about the risk levels of PegNet. The fiats are very low risk, trillions of dollars traded. Probably nobody's going to be able to move those markets. They're sort of medium risk assets, let's say a lot of the cryptos, but even Bitcoin, Ethereum, all these are very deep liquid markets. And then there's, sort of higher risk tokens like PEG or PFCT, or those that are closer to 100 million or a couple hundred million value. There's more of this potential for front running. So the idea is to use PIP 10, make it very targeted, and not slow down all trading on PegNet, but just those tokens that are most at risk. So that's PIP 10. So if you scroll down from there, once you've addressed the front running, okay, well, everybody wants staking. And the proposal for PIP 12 is to take 5,000 peg per block and make that reward for people holding P assets. So how do you reward arbitrageurs for keeping the PUSD price at its correct level? Well, one way is to give them a peg reward for buying cheap PUSD off the markets and holding that in their account. So that's a sort of very straightforward way of doing it. This is about 70% coded. I should say PIP 10 is completely coded. It really just needs to be updated and checked that all the tests are working properly and that it's caught up with the master branch of the code repo. So PIP 12 is about 70% code. It's most of the way there. And some of the developers, specifically Steven, have been working on that. And it's just about there. And it's sort of an elegant way of doing it where everybody that's holding a P asset would get part of the staking reward. So not a lot of barriers, not a lot of requirements. A lot of times in staking, you have to have a very high threshold to participate. Like in Dash, you need a master node, and sort of, I think it's tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of Dash to participate. In PIP 12, it would be effectively anybody with P assets would be able to participate. And it's really elegantly coded in a way that doesn't create a bunch of transactions or a bunch of overhead. It's just accounting done in the software itself. So PIP 13 is sort of the predecessor to how we fight these miner attacks. Okay, stakers can also report the prices, not just miners. Okay, so PIP 13 is a proposal to reward the people that are doing those price reports, but who aren't submitting hash power, but have instead, let's say, PEG staked. Mm-hmm. So this is how you get PEG staking. So now you've got P asset staking, you've got PEG staking, you've got all these different pieces, right? And the PEG staking gives you the ability to submit these prices, just like a miner would every 10 minutes. And the network can then, in PIP 14, look at the difference and see if there's any gap or divergence between the prices submitted by the stakers and the miners. And if there seems like there's some funny business going on, the divergence is too high, the network can just pause conversions on those affected P assets. So rather than allowing, $1,000 yen or whatever, if it sees outside of a very narrow band a change, all of a sudden you can pause those suspicious conversions, right? And that's sort of a very powerful approach, because a lot of the methods that we looked at before were between previous blocks and current blocks. So what was the price before? What was the price now? Instead, this compares two existing prices in the current block reported by two different parties, which is really interesting. And the white hat had proposals that were sort of a little even more sophisticated, where there would be comparing prices from past miners and things like that. Some of the infrastructure isn't quite there yet to support that more advanced version, but this is effectively a first implementation where you'd have the stakers and the miners. Effectively later on, you could add previous miners and effectively make it more and more costly for somebody to try a 51% attack and effectively it would defuse it. And then finally, in PIP 15, it's just effectively a detector for spikes. Occasionally, we see in the network that some API has gone off the rails at CoinMarketCap or some data aggregator, and they'll report an incorrect price for an asset, and it could be 1,000% off or 10,000% off. It's not an attack. It's not, you know, a malicious miner. It's not, you know, some sort of manipulation. It's just an API error, right? And so we can catch these with fairly loose criteria, right? If a price all of a sudden drops more than 50% or increases more than 100%, which is really, really rare on these larger tokens. I mean, a big move in a day on Ethereum would be like 20%, right? Or even some of the smaller tokens like Raven, it would be like a 50% move. But you hardly ever see like 100% or more in a single 10-minute period, right? And so this is effectively just a way to catch those API errors. So you can have very fine-grained look at, is there malicious data, you know, 0.5% tolerance, and you can have a fairly loose filter for, you know, is this like a suspicious spike that's probably an API error? Okay, make that a very loose, right? And so this sort of gives us all the parts of the toolbox that we needed, all the tools in the toolbox that we needed in order to avoid bad data getting into PegNet, right? From miners, from front runners, or just in the case of a bad API, right? So that's the vision here, is it feels like we finally have all the pieces we need in order to close all those attack vectors. And then, yeah, it makes total sense to open up peg conversions, but after we close the attack vectors. So we said PIP 10's coded, PIP 12 is mostly coded, PIP 13 has been proposed, but not yet coded. And we're sort of hashing out the last details between the developers, and we want to get everybody's feedback. So to your question, if you jump into the Discord in the PIPs channel, you'll see sort of all the discussion that is going on around PIPs and the links in there. So feel free to pop in and offer your opinion, because this is going to be a big upgrade. And we want miners, websites, wallets, exchanges, everybody on board. But I think these concepts are pretty solid, and there's a lot of consensus around them. You know, there may be a few points of questioning, like, do we turn off FCT conversions? That's another potential attack vector that we saw before, people converting FCT into PFCT and trying to dump that into PEG. That may be less of an issue now that the front running will be dampened and you really won't be able to move around the price of FCT or PEG. So PIP 10 sort of addresses some of that. So that may be something that we leave in there. I actually think more gateways would be good, but we have to align the incentives, right? If there's a gateway, there has to be value flowing to the miners or the stakers, right? And that can be done in the case of PEG, but it would require some action on the part of the Factom community if they wanted to offer tokens to miners or stakers on PegNet. Now, to be fair, PegNet is the single largest user of Factom, so hopefully those communities are fairly aligned, but there's no specified proposal yet on exactly how the gateway stuff would work. So we'll see where that lands. But you know, this also sort of changes some of the supply model, right? Especially if we go down a road of, okay, there's a 5,000 reward for miners. There's a 5,000 peg per block reward for P asset stakers. It's a 5,000 reward for peg stakers that are doing the oracles. And let's say we get to that more advanced version of the PIP and we're rewarding past miners, you know, the miners from 100 or 1,000 blocks before. That adds a huge amount of protection to PegNet, but it also, you know, now we're talking about 20,000 peg per block instead of 10,000, right? 5 for the current miners, 5 for the past miners, 5,000 for the P asset, and 5,000 for the peg stakers. And so it would increase the total number of peg, but I think most people would be fine with that as long as we're getting the things that the system needs to succeed, largely, here's how you get liquidity, here's how you get arbitrage going, here's how we get more secure oracles. None of those things happen for free. Okay, then let's put value towards them, right? So anyway, that's sort of all what's coming together, and that's why I call it PegNet 2.0, because it really is a major upgrade to the supply economics, to the whole system, the way it works. And yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see. Hopefully we can get a lot of this coded up and decided in the community, and build consensus in the next few weeks, and then require some testing, and then exchanges and everybody actually have to update their software. But I'd love to see it in the next 4 weeks or so. You know, so talking about a fairly short timeline, but a lot of it's already been coded. It's about building the consensus and then getting the system activated and properly tested.
Excellent. That was really thorough, David. Thank you so much for going through all of that. Encourage people to, you know, find the different areas that interest you or you have a greater opinion in, and jump into the Discord, into the PIPS channel to participate in the conversation. Where are the areas where there's still some debate going out?
I'd say mostly around FCT, just as a gateway. I can see both sides of it. I don't have a strong opinion either way. Again, like I said, I'd rather keep more gateways. In fact, even figure out ways to open gateways. If the Hedera community or the Algorand community or others want their users to be able to access all the pegged assets, then it makes perfect sense to add an Algorand or Hedera gateway in, right? So they could burn or even lock up Hedera or Algorand and turn it into P-Algo or P-Hedera, right? That's maybe one of the only things we didn't cover in this update. Is there's a bunch of new tokens that are over the requirements and thresholds to be listed on PegNet. And so there's a whole list that is in sort of the wish list in Discord that people have been talking about. So if you go to the P assets section, I tried to aggregate a lot of them that would be easy to add. HBAR, which is Hedera, NEO, the Dubai, United Arab Emirates, currency. There's the CRO, which is crypto.com, Ethereum Classic, ETC. You've got PONT, PDoge, all of those different. So there's plenty of sort of very active communities, and I think we've got enough in here to get us to 50 P assets on PegNet. So this would be adding 8 more of the top, mostly cryptos, but also a couple of fiat currencies. I'd love to see the Argentinian peso in there, but we have to check on, again, if we have got the data sets are robust enough to list it. But you know, that would be awesome to have.
Yeah, no question about that one. For these additional tokens, are they looking at getting added with this new 2.0 rollout?
That's the idea. Like, you don't do updates all the time. Really, they've been every few months. We'll probably end up with a cadence that looks a lot like BCH. They do a semi-annual update every 6 months in, I believe it's May and November every year. So effectively, the community has 3 months to debate and design and code updates, and then eventually the updates get sort of finalized and frozen in place, and then it's all testing for 3 months, and then it goes live. And what's nice is if you pick a cadence like that, all the exchanges, all the wallets, everybody knows the plan. Everybody knows exactly when the next upgrade is going to happen. Now, PegNet's a much earlier project. You know, the Genesis block for BCH and BTC were back in 2009, right? So they've been around for 5 years or 10 years now. And so for PegNet, we need to move a lot faster. And so especially in the early days, it was like weekly or every few weeks there was an update. But, you know, I think quarterly is probably a good target for us for now. I mean, ultimately, it's up to the coders and the miners how often they want to upgrade things. Some of the proposals have been to allow miners to directly select the P assets by updating files that describe which oracles they're going to report. So once something like that gets implemented, then the miners will be able to add and remove P assets based on sort of if they're meeting the criteria, if they fall below the criteria, right? And that would be a lot faster and more fine-grained than waiting for the next big upgrade, right? But when it comes to the features themselves, you know, I think twice a year makes sense as a cadence to sort of go for, but I think we're still a little early for that. So I think every 3 months is probably reasonable. And 2.0 is a big upgrade. You know, I want to say we had our last upgrade in December or January. I'd have to go back and look at when the last set of pips got implemented, but it was about 3 months ago. So, or maybe even a little longer, kind of in a time warp in the whole quarantine. It's like, you know, what's today? Wednesday, Saturday?
Oh my goodness. No, I'd agree with you on that, with the timing and just having a good cadence and flow to it, because you have all these different miners and exchanges and traders that they can then, you know, have set expectations. There's less confusion and makes things smoother as you're rolling these out. Let's see, for any of these pips, where do you see additional community members jumping in for discussion?
There is so much coding and testing that needs to be done. By all means, if you have the ability and interest to dive in, especially if you've got experience with Golang as a programming language, absolutely encourage you to get into that pips channel, get involved in the discussion, and also say where you can help and what, you know, I'm sure it's going to get down to a finalized list of here's exactly what's in the upgrade, here's what's already done, here's what still has to be done, and that's sort of being done at the pip level, and then it'll get down to even a little more fine-grained than that. So, but yeah, just participate. This is an open development process. You know, everybody can make proposals, but at the end of the day, we have to collaborate to get it done. That's the nature of open source, is building with buddies, as Graham would say in his famous book. So yeah, no, it's great. I'm looking forward to that process. I've made a few posts in the pip channel, and I expect that'll get stirred up today. You know, and we'll see where the consensus is at and sort of where people have questions and concerns. A lot of it I find is not actual disagreement. A lot of it's just defining things well enough that everybody is using the same words to mean the same things, and having enough context in the system. Have you read all the pips? Do you know what's being proposed? Do you understand how they sort of interact with each other? So comments like, oh, turn on the conversions, like that's not helpful if you're not talking about closing the attack vectors. Okay, if you want that, let's get those attack vectors closed as quickly as possible, and then we can turn on the conversions, right? So, you know, yeah, just jump on in there. Read the pips is a great way to start. Most of them are on my Medium. The ones that have already been coded up are on GitHub. And so we can include all those links here in the video. But yeah, should be an interesting few weeks. You've been looking forward to sort of all this culminating, and it feels like it's all coming together. So PegNet 2.0, here we come.
I feel the same too. And, you know, so much of this video chat has been about the core development of PegNet and the system, but also on the outside of all of that, with the different collaborations for the different integrations that PegNet has been seeing and integrated with the Chainlink community. And they've been super supportive and excited as well about having their first Oracle proof of work Oracle plugin there for them. And then also the ptrader.co website. I want to touch on that because there's been some facelifts, and want to showcase some of that to the community if I can.
Sure. Yeah.
Over here. So this is when someone logs into their account, they'll see this now, which is new. So do you want to give a little update to what this is and where things are moving forward?
I think a lot of this is pulling from TradingView. And so this is the live price of Bitcoin. You can see it's $9,289 right now. You see also some of the books on, looks like Vitex mostly, where Peg and other P assets are being offered, you know, the bids and the asks, right? So this is sort of an easy way to visualize all of that. There'll be a few tweaks coming as the arbitrage module is fully rolled out. But if you go to the wallet tab, you'll see that there's also been a good bit sort of added there. You have the interface, but also now you have exchanges on the left. And so this gives you a list of all the places you can buy and sell P assets outside of the PegNet. Vitex, Vinex, Citex, Qtrade, Belixi, Hotbit, IDEX, and Uniswap, right? The whole list. And those links go directly to that trading pair. So should make it super easy for people to find, because that's a common question, like, well, where do I buy this stuff? Right there in the interface, right? Trading View script, I think is largely the same, but if you go to arbitrage, it shows you sort of how those arbitrage cycles work. And there'll be an easy way to basically set up a bot to run that arbitrage cycle, either when prices are high or when prices are low, how to do that between the exchanges and the PegNet itself. And then in security, of course, you can export your key, you can, you know, set up your two-factor authentication, you can update your password. All those sorts of things are looking good, and it's got all the new logos and the new branding on there. So no, I think it looks great. It's super easy to use. People have given it great feedback, you know, and yeah, it's a really easy way to enter the ecosystem at this point. So I think you know, the developers done an incredible job on it. And thanks to everybody that's been testing it out. If you have feature requests, there is now a P Trader Discord. So feel free to jump in there, and there's a feature suggestions channel. So I'm sure we can include the link for that too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, bravo to the community that's been behind all of this. I know this has been a little bit of your baby project within PegNet as well, to make things, the interface and the experience, elevate that for the community. So I want to say a big thank you for that. I can see the progress has been fantastic. This is looking really, really nice. And, you know, this is in its early phase. So these developments are continuing to, you know, build on themselves and improve, and love the direction that it's going. It's very clean, friendly, and useful more than anything. Right?
Absolutely. No, it's great. The interfaces, it's good to see them so easy to use. You know, I think that's really the key for getting more people involved, is just lower the technical barrier. Here's a website, put in your email, put in a password, you're off to the races. And we should say, if you set up a pTrader account, it now gives you 50 peg, so you can do conversions and test it out. Which is great. Just makes it even easier. You don't have to go to an exchange just to try it out. It just pre-populates in your account. Once you create the account, after a couple of blocks, you should see that 50 peg. So yeah, a community member donated 50,000 pegs, so there's enough for the first 1,000 users. I think about half of that has been used up so far. So create an account today, and you should see those pegs show up.
Excellent, excellent. And another part of this, you know, exterior world of PegNet is the it's not the desktop wallet.
The web wallet.
The web wallet, thank you. The web wallet as well. You want to touch on that, or?
Sure. I mean, this is sort of like the full suite of way people can access PegNet. Is you want it on Android. It's on Android today. It's coming for iOS. It's a bit of a longer review process there. You want it on a web wallet. So you'll be able to just go to a website, and there's the same interface that I see in my phone. I can see on the web. And really, that's also a smartphone wallet too, because some people prefer not to use apps. They prefer native web on their phone. Great. Here's an option to do that. And then finally will be the desktop version that people download onto their laptop, and they use like they would any desktop wallet. So you'll have pTrader for the trading tools, you have the smartphone options for your wallet, and you'll have a desktop option. So yeah, it's really cool to see sort of all those variations, you know, because people have different preferences. If you're a serious trader, you're probably going to be over in pTrader using the tools. If you just want some peg and do some conversions on your phone, here's the apps and mobile wallets. And if you sort of are more security conscious or have larger amounts of value, you may want that on your computer as opposed to your phone. You may want a desktop version that you can download. And that's the goal, is to make all of this open source. It's all non-custodial. Nobody's holding your funds, right? You can export your private key. You can, export it to a different wallet entirely. But that also comes with a level of responsibility. Remember, you hold your own keys. And if you lose your keys, there's nothing it can do to recover them for you, right? So that's sort of just important to remind people, like all crypto, that's the expectation, that you need to write down your password, write down your backups, and be responsible with your keys. But the benefit is you have the flexibility and freedom to move very quickly, and that's great.
David, this has been a great update. Thanks so much for taking all of this time to explain what's been going on, where people can chime in, give some insight to different timelines and expectations. I know that this has been a lot to unpack. If you've stayed with us throughout this video to this point, thank you also. And leave your feedback in the comment section below. Let us know what some of your thoughts are and your reactions to some of this activity. We'd love to hear from more people in the community. So any final thoughts from you?
No, that's great. Good update. I'm excited about PegNet 2.0, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussion and writing and debate about that. So I'm really looking forward to that and getting it all out there.
Hey, and if you guys are chiming into consensus virtually for New York City Blockchain Week, they're doing that all online. I'm sure, David, you will have an opportunity to touch on PegNet during your talk at that. And so would love for everybody to tune in and also participate. So again, thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your quarantine week. We look forward to seeing you guys on the Discord and online. Take care, everyone.
Bye.